got this started. Okay, so we're going to learn all the tricks of the trade with reading food labels. I have some handouts here for you. Alright, so we're going to go through and learn how to deconstruct a food label. So if you've ever tried to read them and are not familiar with how to go about doing it, it can be very overwhelming. You're like, well, what am I supposed to look at, this, or this? And then certain diets, we typically recommend a low-carb diet, your fat's going to be a little higher than normal. Same thing with a low-fat diet, your sugar or the carbohydrate intake is going to creep up, because that's how they change the products. When they take fat out of something, they add sugar. It's alarming in fat-free dressings, because you've gone from regular ranch that has about 1 to 2 carbs all the way to 11 for a fat-free ranch dressing. And it doesn't taste very good. That's why I don't really recommend fat-free dressings. So, the more I think, the more I get confused I get. I thought that was cute. So. Alright, so focus on the facts. These are your big ones you want to pay attention to more than anything else. So your serving size, the servings per container, total carb, the breakdown, what we consider the net carbs, okay? So I'll explain that in a few slides, or I have the calculation, and you guys have a handout where it's all calculated with a food label on it, so you can take it with you. Sometimes you forget words that come out of my mouth, I understand, but it's all calculated on this paper and explained, okay? And also protein, very important part of your diet, okay? Okay, so your serving size is the label is based on 1 serving. So whatever the label says, if you're getting 100 calories, it's 1 serving of it. There may be more than 1 serving in that package though. So that's another thing that's next. So that's going to tell you how many, what a serving is in that particular food. We recommend using the measuring cups and food scales, which I have a really cool food scale. I'll show you guys. I have a little bit about it up here. To measure, that's going to be the most accurate way. For packaged foods, you can use usually they give it in more like half a cup serving or a whole cup is a serving, where meat is more accurate on a scale, okay? So, oh, that didn't come out very well, sorry guys. Serving size, so it can get tricky if you don't pay attention, because I found myself doing that before. Let's see, so the serving size on this cottage cheese is a half a cup. Let me go get my measuring cups. Hold on. Okay, so half a cup is a serving. That's not a lot of cottage cheese, right? When you divvy it out and don't use these things, you may be over-portioning it and you don't even know. So that's why it is important. Will you develop an eyeball method? I think so, because you're going to get used to what that half cup looks like. Sometimes your eye gets a little big though, so it never hurts occasionally just to measure it again and be like, oh, I think I can eat more than that. So you don't have to drag these out to Applebee's, but just keep an eye on how things are adding up and what real portions truly are. Alright? Okay, so you would have to take all these numbers on this label and double everything if you ate a whole cup of it. Not that it's necessarily a bad choice, but that would change everything on your food journal if you're logging it. Okay, servings per container, it's also another tricky thing, because I find it alarming the way they label things anymore, like your vitamin water. It says 13 grams of sugar per serving, and you're thinking, oh, it's 20 ounces. I still think that's a little high personally, but there's 2.5 servings in 1 bottle. So again, that one label is showing you what 1 serving size is. You would take that all and double it 2.5 times. Well, you would multiply it by 2.5, and that would get you over 30 grams of sugar in 1 drink. That's the kind of stuff that eats at me so badly. Like, why can't you just be a straight shooter? That and the microwavable soups, actually, I think that's my, yeah, the single serving, the microwave lunch soups. Yeah, let's take a look at that one. Oh, that one came out okay. So this is like a Campbell's chicken noodle soup with a little lid, you microwave. Okay, so 1 serving, see your 60 grams calories. Oh, there's only 7 carbs in it, 3 grams of protein. Oh, it's it's really not that bad. Well, there's 2.5 servings in one container. I have yet to meet anyone that has taken one of those soups, ate half of it, and saved it for lunch the next day. Usually we're eating something else with it. So that's also misleading, you know, because it's very marketed as a one-serving food.
The sodium is 890 milligrams times 2.5.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of sodium. It's just a smidge.
What's the daily requirements of sugar and sodium?
The daily requirements of sugar and sodium. We usually tell patients to hover around 60 grams of carbohydrates, and then women in general usually need between 60 to 80 grams of protein a day. Yeah. There's ways you can calculate it based on the individual, but most women, that's the range that they fall in for protein especially.
What about sodium?
With sodium, the average person, their recommended daily allowance is 2,400 milligrams per day. So you can see you're pretty close right there. I think maybe a little over, possibly. So, what else? Okay, so that is scary. And then your carbohydrates. Let's face it, granted we have all ladies here, and I always use the example of carbs are our crack. We love them, they're what we crave, they're our comfort foods, and most of the time not necessarily the best choices. And again, portion sizes might not be played correctly. So you have your net carbs is what we focus on in our practice. So what you're going to be doing, this calculation over here, so your equation to get the net carbs, you take the total carbohydrates, that would be 17. So you think of that in the grand scheme of 60, that's a lot of carbs. You think Erin's lost her mind. You know, she hasn't swear. Well, maybe she a little bit. So you would subtract dietary fiber. You don't absorb dietary fiber. You want it in your diet for health benefits. It helps to lower and maintain your blood sugars, helps to lower bad cholesterol. It also helps to keep your intestines and colon healthy. It actually helps reduce risks of colon cancer by filtering toxins out as it digests it. So fiber is out. That means we're deducting the 7 grams from the fiber. And then sugar alcohols, they are going to be in pretty much all foods that are marketed as a diabetic dessert or sweet or candy or anything low carb that's sweet is going to have a sugar alcohol because it's a way they can sweeten the food. The body will not identify the sugar alcohols. You do not absorb them. So those also come out. So with the 7 and the 3, you've got 10 carbs that you have to account for. Okay? So you're not absorbing them, you don't have to count them. You would be absorbing the calories from them. So if you go crazy overboard with the sugar-free, low-carb stuff, that can be weight gain. But, you know, just occasional, if you need that treat or something, it's perfect to do and not rack up your carbs and throw you over for the day. Okay? So in the end, we're getting 7 carbs that we actually, did I say 10? Sorry. 7 carbs that you have to account for after subtracting everything. Make sense? Make sense? Hmm? I'm seeing the look.
I'm not sure that I understand.
Okay. Can you see this? It's pretty much the same label that's on your paper. So you start out with the 17 total, and underneath, they have to tell you where all those carbohydrates are coming from. If anything is added into that food. So there's 7 grams of fiber that are directly coming from fiber. There are 2 grams of sugar, and then 3 grams of sugar alcohol.
Okay.
It never adds up to the number at the top because
Okay.
there's miscellaneous starches that aren't directly coming from these 3 things.
Okay.
Okay.
But these are definitely, we know that are in there.
Those are in there.
And then the rest that are not accounted for, is that what you have to burn off somehow?
No, you would just take the 17 and this would be 10 together and subtract it from 17. And that leaves you with what carbs your body's going to absorb as a carbohydrate.
Okay.
Okay.
So is that number fairly high then?
No, it's actually not bad because you have 60.
Okay.
If there was, these 2 were not in it, 17 is a little high for a protein bar, I'd say.
I see.
So that's a way you can lower it and still get a treat.
Okay.
Okay? This is, I think, an Atkins bar. Oh my God, I yanked it off their website. It's daisies. So, all right. Protein, so important. It really does help sustain your hunger. It helps fill you up more quickly, keep you full longer, etc. Also, the general recommendations for women, 60 to 80, men 80 to 100 grams a day. All right, so you're thinking, okay, how am I going to measure the steak? Because there's no nutrition label smacked onto the steak at all, so how am I going to add this up? Well, the digital scales you can get online, you can buy at Walmart, Target, everywhere pretty much sells food scales anymore. I think Walgreens even used to have one, but we do recommend the digital ones because they're more accurate. So, this is the coolest thing. It's really, I'm definitely a dietitian, but I found this food scale online, which you can't see it that well here, but it's made by Kintrix, and you weigh the food, and there's a little guide you use to type in the food code, and it weighs it and makes a little nutrition label for you. I brought mine in so we can play with it in a minute. So, yeah, I got really excited about that one. So, they're really, really cool. And Amazon, you can usually get free shipping on Amazon. I'm awful about that.
How about you?
I got a really good deal. I got mine for $15, but it retails between around 40, higher, depending on the sale or the site you go to. That's another reason why I got so excited. Alright. These items, this is not me saying you can just have as much fun as you want with these things, but I don't focus on them quite as much. For calories, you can take a calorie diet and you look at the percentages where protein's coming from, where carbs, and where fat's coming from, and you can fluctuate those. So you can change the percentages of how those, say, 1,000 calories are added up by changing the percentage of each of those three. Okay, so I don't pay attention to calories quite as much. Total fat, you don't want to get carried away, but fat keeps you full. It stays with you. It satisfies longer than a carbohydrate was, because carbohydrates start breaking down as soon as you put them in your mouth. They're already getting broken down. So they're not going to stay with you as long as the protein and fat that don't start until stomach and small intestine. Okay? Cholesterol and sodium, in general, as your choices change and also as your portions would change for the surgical weight loss, you're not going to be eating enough volume to really, really be worried about these. Okay? That's naturally going to start decreasing with the portion sizes. Okay? And bottom line, do not go all out on processed foods, because most fresh fruits and vegetables and meats and dairy and eggs and all that great stuff, it doesn't have a lot of added sodium. It's that processing that they're going to add things you cannot pronounce to it and jack up the sodium. Okay? The percent daily value, which, look at this sheet here. It's going to show on the right side of your paper that, okay, the total fat, 20% of your daily value. Well, if you look lower, percent daily values are all based on a 2,000 calorie diet. It's most likely a 2,000 calorie diabetic diet with a lot more carbs than we recommend. So don't pay attention to those percentages as they would be for your particular plan, okay? Because it's just general information. And most women, pretty sure 2,000 calories would not be looking good on the scale in a few days. So we don't recommend that high calorie intake either. So, all right. Okay. The lingo.